Ahoy there, today on the Red Sea, anti-lockdown as of Reddit. Why? It's about money. If you can do your job from home, you're probably not that concerned about a continued lockdown. If you're one of those people who has been laid off and actually makes more on unemployment, thanks to the federal $600 a week supplement, you're probably also not that concerned. But if you own a small business, or you lost your job but you do not qualify for unemployment, the longer the lockdown goes on, the closer you are to losing everything. I know a couple of small business owners burning through their life savings. Meanwhile, my state has not been hit hard, and we have done so well at preventing the hospitals from being overloaded. Every nurse I know is furloughed. Got to agree not to forget the rent is getting stacked up. Even if businesses are closed, rent piling up is what will kill businesses. Zero revenue is tough, but if businesses can furlough employees and get rent forgiveness, many could hunker down and go on survival mode to be in a position to reopen and rehire once the economy reopens. But rent stacking up, even if repayment is deferred, just does not leave many businesses a fighting chance. Let's not forget anyone dealing with abuse in their homes. If I was in lockdown with my parents or exes, of course I'd want it over as soon as possible. For some, the choice is even tougher. Contract COVID-19, live on with no sense of self or no friends/family, or get murdered. Tougher still if there are kids involved, with no legal right to leave on their own. It amazes me how many people are unaware of this, despite how ubiquitous domestic abuse is. If you're not affected by it yourself, you know someone close to you who is/has been there. Child abuse reports are down because third-party people do not see the kids anymore. I'm anti-lockdown nationwide. I'm all for local lockdown. I'll explain what I mean. I live in a rural town in Oregon, USA. We have had 3 cases. We have to follow the same rules as Portland, who has had thousands of cases. Obviously, my town shouldn't have to follow the same rules as a huge city because it's not the same situation. There are towns all over the US that are hurting financially because they have to follow the same lockdowns as larger cities that are getting hit hard. In my little town, I have seen almost a dozen businesses shut down, citizens going homeless, and nobody can do anything about it. All this misery for 3 ducking cases, all of which were not hospitalized. Our only hospital is close to bankruptcy because there are no doctors operating or accepting patients. Obviously, Portland should lock down. It has a high population density and has a lot of travel in and out because of the large airport. However, my town shouldn't have to lock down when no one comes in or out and no one has gotten sick. The point of lockdown originally, which I was all for, was to build up hospital and ventilator capacity so it would not be exceeded. You may remember flatten the curve from like a month ago. That has been done. Hospitals have been and are continually building up capacity. We have ventilators stockpiled and are making more every day. And this thing isn't not nearly as bad as it was predicted to be. Obviously coronavirus is a real issue, but that does not change the fact that all predictions have been overblown. I'm obviously not saying go make out with strangers, socially distance, wear masks, have at-risk people continue to stay home, do all that. But if we do not reopen soon, we're even more screwed than we are currently. Lockdown is going to kill more people than a virus. Elective surgeries. This does not just mean those jobs. It often includes things like kidney and heart transplants, medically necessary back and neck surgeries, etc. are not happening. People are starving and going bankrupt. Drug abuse and suicide is going to skyrocket if it has not already. We cannot wait. If a vaccine is coming, and there is no guarantee we ever develop an effective one, it is at bare minimum months away from first production. Likewise, a working treatment is not guaranteed. We need to get real life back on track before this moves from a Great Depression-like state, how job losses currently, to worse. Also, let's ditch the strawman. Yes, the media has managed to some morons who say they just want this to end so they can get haircuts or whatever. This is not about you're too weak to even sit at home and game. A vast majority of people who want to reopen wish to get to work, seeing if they can salvage any part of their largely ruined lives. While we are allowing people to go back to work, we can still be responsible. Have people who are high risk stay home. Everyone nationwide should mask up and socially distance. And if there is an outbreak, quarantine that area. But we cannot go on like this for much longer before people just start to say F the law. I need to fix my life. And they are right. Let's at least have some responsible action instead of an across-the-board lockdown that would not last. I do not think it's always people not caring about other people's health. My main income is from a job I do at home, so my money was not affected. am not in jeopardy of losing my house, car, or being unable to put food on my table. Having been furloughed by a retail PT job, I would be livid about the financial strain the stay-home orders caused. People already do not earn a living wage, and trying to sign up for unemployment was a joke for most people. I'm all about wearing a mask and gloves while serving customers, and other than that, I do not care to leave my house. The trade-off is not worth it. The UN is predicting that the economic fallout from COVID-19 will toss 400 million people into extreme poverty worldwide, and will make it much more difficult for the 700 million people already living in extreme poverty to get out. The least optimistic projections of COVID illnesses do not come close to these numbers. The lockdown was about flattening the curve, slowing the spread of the virus so that hospitals were not overwhelmed. It was never about reducing the total number of infections, at least not to any significant extent. It was about spreading out the same number over a longer period of time. The curve is now over flattened. To turn a phrase, far from being overwhelmed, hospitals in many areas are basically empty because there are not enough COVID patients and they cannot do any other business. Due to the lockdowns are causing real damage. The rest of the universe does not go on hold while we wait for COVID to blow over. People cannot get elective treatments like getting pre-cancers removed, or get the regular checkups that catch early stage cancers. The economic damage is real, too. A lockdown causes all sorts of economic damage, and will even kill other people in the long run. Thus a lockdown that is more strict than the minimum necessary to avoid overwhelming hospitals is causing harm for no return. We currently appear to be well on that side of the line in most places. I'd say basically everywhere besides a few major cities. But there are probably some other exceptions. In those areas, we should be opening back up one step at a time, while keeping an eye on case totals. If things start trending upwards in a way that is likely to result in overwhelming healthcare, then stop reopening and maybe take a step back. But there is no reason to stay at the current level of lockdown given current conditions. This is also a growing opinion for lots of people here in the UK. We know we cannot keep lockdown going forever, so the balance is going to be what kinds of businesses reopen and when. There's news recently about getting some of the kids back to school, but school kids do not adhere to social distancing. You can have the best social distancing practices in place while in lessons, with reduced class sizes and spacing, but the second the kids go on break it all goes out the window. The only thing we can realistically do is keep the kids away from the elderly and the vulnerable. We know the kids are going to mix between themselves, so the only way to reduce the spread of infection is to minimize their contact with the at-risk groups. One of the primary reasons the government want the kids back in school is so that parents can go back to work. And despite what a lot of people keep saying on the UK subs, it's not just about trying to save big businesses. There are millions of people who will lose their job unless we start to reopen soon. And that's not even getting into the many thousands of small businesses that will go under. I'm frustrated by some of the brazen protests and lack of situational awareness of some protesters. Why would you confront frontline workers? However, I think the only difference between me and most protesters is time. Anyone who agrees that a lockdown is a good idea has a figure in their mind, even if they do not know it, when they would conclude that it is doing more harm than good. If you'll allow me to introduce my strawman, consider the idea that we were told the lockdown will last 10 years. Most would agree that is more destructive than helpful and deprives us all of fundamental needs we have as humans, which include the need to be social, be mobile, have a sense of purpose, and make a living. Now, consider that we were told 10 months. How would you react? 10 weeks? 10 days? We're all somewhere on that spectrum. The scary part is that there are no guarantees that the virus will ever be contained or easily treated. So, technically, this could be a fact of life problem that coexists with us as influenza does. Would this mean the end of modern civilization? If not, how do we as a society find an acceptable level of risk and, more importantly, engage in public discourse about it with the rest of the world? This is a difficult balancing act between lives, livelihoods and quality of life for government officials and society as a whole. I'm sheltering in place and wearing a mask when I go out in public. Even as places open up around me, I'm limiting any travel outside the home. While I do not agree with the protesters, I think they have generally good, but perhaps misinformed, intentions. Because the goalposts has been moved for every area outside of the New York area, most hospitals did not get overwhelmed and are now laying off staff. I live in a city that is barely seeing double-digit increases in new cases despite a partial reopening a while back. The entire local economy has been wiped out, and I see friends having to go to the food bank to feed their family. I'm fine with banning large events and keeping social distancing restrictions in place, but we cannot stay locked in our houses for an entire summer. Let's flip the question. Pro lockdown as of Reddit. Why? The amount of hate I see get thrown at anyone even rationally raising legitimate issues with the lockdown on this site is insane. Not everyone who is anti-lockdown is some MAGA hater BTW. In March, I thought it was reasonable and prudent to stay home, save lives. Since then it has become clear to me that A, this virus is here to stay and will never go away, and B, that we will not have any means of artificial vaccination for at least a year, most probably longer, and maybe never. I do acknowledge that this is a suspension of civil rights, and I was happy to suspend mine while I thought there was a plan, or at least a plan to make a plan. Continuing with run and hide as a response is not a plan. If we cannot eliminate the virus, and we cannot control it, we need to face it, and every day we do not face it, we needlessly and with no benefit sacrifice our well-being. The only control we have at this point is to meter the rate of new cases so as not to overwhelm our resources. You expect the world to just continue shipping you toilet paper to your house. Someone had to operate the paper maker, then the cutter, then the roller, then the packaging, then putting on a pallet. One of the people loading the pallets has COVID-19. He has infected the pallet. Then there was the truck driver who took the rolls from a factory to the warehouse of the invoicee. This warehouse is still fully staffed. 100, 500 people, and they are at high risk for getting the virus. They then load up another truck that then moves a smaller collection of the toilet paper to a grocery store. This store has to unload the toilet paper and then shelve it. Remember earlier where the pallet was infected? Yeah, you might get COVID-19 because someone at the factory has the virus. What was the ducking point of lockdown if the virus comes from a factory that was contaminated? Or from a sick Amazon worker? Or the mail person? Or your lawn care people? Or from a doctor or nurse? Or from the Uber driver who is infected but does not know it yet and has been wearing the same gloves for hours on end? You locked yourself down because you could. They could not. You expected them to keep your power going so you could watch Netflix. That means someone is working in an office at the internet service provider, Netflix, and the power company, being at risk for the spread. The lockdown was to make yourself feel safe and have a hive mind to relieve the stress of the situation. But how is the power still on? Did you wonder that? No. You were patting yourself on the back about how good you are for locking down. How is the internet still working? You have to have people on site to repair damaged equipment and troubleshoot. I work in telecom. We have no restrictions on amount of people allowed in the data center. There could be 40 people there right now. What about Netflix? They have stayed up, and grocery stores have not abided by head count either. You did nothing but stay at home. Whenever you went to the grocery store, you were increasing the chances of viral transmission, mask and all. But from the grocery worker's perspective on lockdown, from my friend, she works at Kroger. What lockdown? I go to work every day and could get infected. If I have healthcare, it sucks. I have to stay away from my own children and husband just in case. I haven't not seen them in person in over a month. I have to stay with a single coworker. Duck lockdown. I have to work while you lay around watching Netflix. You then come in every day and bitch at me about how we have run out of something and we should have ordered it. Duck you. Unfortunately it is the end of the video, but do not worry, there are many more coming. Like and subscribe for more videos from the Red Sea. Thanks for watching.